Hi everybody, this is Dave for ggsgamer. I'm here with Dom and Janos, and we're going to be talking about the newly announced Total War Attila. So, for those of us who don't know, what is Total War Attila?
Well, Total War Attila is set 400 years after the establishment of the Roman Empire. It's a period of great change in Europe. Climate's cooling. The Roman Empire is divided. It's huge. Mismanaged, there's corruption, rife, and there are many barbarian tribes who want a piece of Rome at this point. And there's not much they can do about it on account of the fact that, so huge, so little, so few armies to cover such a large territory.
Yeah, and it's not just that is the problem, but on the east something is happening, and Attila and his Huns are just about to unleash themselves on these barbarian forces and on the Roman Empire. So they are essentially getting just pushed into the borders of the Roman Empire. And this is a time of big turmoil and big fights.
So we're going to see a lot of infighting between the different Roman factions and the factions around them. Are we going to see the massive Attila army coming towards Rome, or is it going to be more of a world conquest thing? Does it follow his actual actions, or is it more of a take your own role sort of thing?
Yeah, there are multiple elements. At this point is that there's no internal big fights at Rome. It's Theodosius just died, divided the empire at last and then forever between his two sons. It's relatively peaceful, but in the upcoming years there's a lot of internal trouble is to come, and if you're playing with Rome you have to take care of those as well. And Rome is, if you play with Rome, it's more about surviving. It's a survival strategy game, especially with the Western Roman Empire. This is the first legendary starting position for in a history of Total War. But if you want a more traditional empire building experience, then there are all the barbarian factions who start out small, and you can go and just carve out a bit of the Roman Empire, establish your new kingdom. So there's a lot to offer.
And regardless of who you're playing as, there is the constant threat of the Huns in the east, and given a certain point in time, Attila will be born, and once he's come of age, you'll take control of the horde itself. And at that point, they become an epic force of destruction to be reckoned with. So it's really, as Janos says, it's a survival strategy. It's the player against all the odds, not just this changing world and turmoil, but the coming of the storm that is Attila.
Yeah, and the internal strife and the economic and social breakdown, all the barbarians on the border. Even if you play with the barbarians, you find yourself between the hammer and the anvil. There's a still relatively strong Roman Empire, and the Huns are coming. You have to act, you have to do something, and the climate is changing. It's a time of cool down, a bigger climate cool down. So the winter will be longer and longer. The snow line is moving to the south. There's more and more problem with the food and the failing crops. So there's a lot of things to manage and a lot of things to survive.
So it sounds like the battlefield and the world map is going to be very dynamic with the waves of barbarians conquering different states and stuff. Are there any gameplay elements that are unique to the barbarians, the way that they fight and the way that they act?
They have a bunch of units that are somewhat more rowdy than the more civilized Roman units and the like, and that plays very much into the battle now. These raider units will sort of indiscriminately set fire to anything that they run past, and the fire plays a really big role in battles. Fire will spread throughout a city, and this destruction will cause panic and ruin the combat ability of the defending force. And then going back into the campaign after that, the settlement will be in tatters, the economy will be jeopardized, and it'll take a lot of time and investment to build back up to that. Now these raider units, if you want to capture a settlement, it causes a lot of problems because you don't necessarily want to burn the settlement down while you're capturing it. So there's a fine line when you're playing as these more barbaric factions between taking the cheap and numerous but extremely rowdy and violent units into battle, or taking your more elite but more expensive, more controllable units.
Yeah, and barbarians use many of the barbarian units use 200 axes, and you can see all the new more Dark Ages type of uniforms, and not uniforms, but more like armor and different helmets and weaponry arriving to the battlefield.
So it sounds like a lot of them play in kind of a berserker role. They're very unwieldy and kind of chaotic, as opposed to if you have more experienced units. Does that mean you can build these kind of ragtag units up to a more elite force, or is it just a case of these are kind of the raiders that Attila has picked up along the way, and he's just utilizing them to get through settlements and villages?
I mean, raider units, you can obviously you can rank them up, at which point they will maybe be more effective in battle, higher morale, better able to defend themselves or to damage the enemy. But the fact that the raiders will never go away, they're still going to be rampaging.
But there's we have the unit upgrade system where essentially some of the raider units, some of the more advanced raider units can be upgraded essentially to better units, different type of unit, but better units, but in the same role, or even to like prestige units. So it is possible, not for every single unit, but it is possible.
It still involves a conscious decision to train these units to be more disciplined soldiers effectively.
Right. So how does the world map relate into previous Total War titles? Is it does it focus on a smaller area? Like I know the way you did with the Caesar DLC, it was quite an intimate battlefield area where it was kind of regions, or is it a much wider scope of Europe?
It's bigger than Rome too, so it's a full standalone game, and the world map is bigger than Rome. It's less areas in the east, but more of the whole steppe and the northeastern part of Europe. It's played in Europe, so the map will be familiar by the shape. It's essentially the same as Napoleon or like Empire. So it's Europe, but for example, the province setup, the settlements are all the late Roman and early medieval kind of settlements and regions.
So you mentioned the way fire takes a kind of a pivotal role in battles. Is there any other elements that are going to affect the way troops act with their AI, and has the AI changed since the previous games?
Well, something we've added in battle, which does change it entirely, deployable barricades. Now these serve as means of blocking streets off. You can mount them with units, so anyone trying to charge down will not get a chance to actually affect the unit. You can put bowmen on top, so they can effectively fire at anyone approaching. But even if you don't man them, there's still very good ways of funneling the enemy down certain pathways. Perhaps you've established maybe a kind of ambush, or where you can funnel them past one of your towers, so you can get a bit of extra sort of support from that. And yeah, I mean, the AI uses these as well, so no two battles are the same.
Yeah, and fire affects the morale of the defender, so as Tom said, it can have a very big impact. Even defenders can run away if they are not that great troops, because look, this settlement just burned down, there's nothing to defend here. It's like, we shouldn't do this. Or diseases, for example. Diseases can have a big impact on the morale and the fighting capabilities of an army, and diseases on the company can spread from settlement to settlement, can brought around along with armies, and can be used as a early, almost like biological weapon. But trade routes also can carry diseases here and there, and as it has not just an economic effect if it spreads to a settlement, but army effect. If it's caught by an army, it can be a really big game changer.
Are you planning on doing anything different with the multiplayer this time around? Because I know from my experience, the previous Total War games, fighting someone online, another player, was completely different to fighting the artificial intelligence. Are you doing anything more to kind of build on that multiplayer and the dedicated multiplayer fan base that you have?
Currently, we are going to be pursuing a multiplayer system very much like in Rome 2, so multiple campaign modes and battle modes.
Yeah, and essentially all the new features are available in multiplayer, and focusing on that, for example, this whole burning the settlement and funneling troops that can provide a very, very nice new angle on, for example, settlement battles.
And the way in which the barricades may be placed in different places does mean, depending on who you're fighting, you're never quite sure how they're going to set up the inside of their settlement, the defender. So, depending on who you're playing against, or even what mood they're in, they're going to set it up differently depending on the troops they have with them. So it really should, even the same map will never be the same twice. You see what I mean? So yeah, it should really change things up.
Yeah, and in multiplayer you can select the escalation level. We were talking about this more and more destroyed settlement as siege is progressing, but you can use this in custom battles and multiplayer as well. So you can simulate a situation where there are already breaches in the wall, and the focus is more on the street fighting and not stopping the enemy at the wall, and that's also new to the multiplayer as well.
Going back to the units just for a second, I know you mentioned the raiders and that, but are there any kind of unique units we can look forward to seeing? Because I know the different units are quite an exciting talking point when it comes to Total War, and some of my favourites were like the War Dogs with the Romans, and going back to the Shogun games like the Elite Archers and stuff. Are there any kind of your favourite or the most exciting units that are coming into the new game that you can talk about?
There are a couple of them currently we are not speaking about because essentially we will reveal the factions or the other playable factions later on. But personally I really like the crossbowmen. These are new to essentially Attila, and they are very good point blank and very good just as a direct fire troops. They're almost like musketeers in Empire. But the drawback is they cannot fire over their own troops' heads, so the positioning of these units are very, very important.
Okay, so the kind of the wider array of units that you have, the more tactically diverse you have to be. Because I know a common tactic is to kind of line your archers behind your infantrymen to keep them protected and fire over. Is this why you introduced the crossbowmen, to kind of diversify like the tactical pool the player can call upon?
Historically, crossbow is appearing in the Dark Ages. It appears at this time. Romans used crossbows, so there was a historical side. But as you said, it brings back a very nice tactical element as well. Similarly, with the troops, most of the Roman troops have plumbata. It's like a throwing dart, and that can be very devastating if used in a certain situation.
So, when with the number of tactics, do the generals play a different part now? Because I know with the generals previously they had a lot of abilities. Do they change depending on if you're using Attila himself, maybe?
Well, generals now have a single ability. There's a range of them, but each general will sort of come into the world with a certain specialization, and his role on the battlefield is, I'd say, it's greatly more important than it was previously, in that his effect on the men around him is extremely his effect on the morale and stuff. It's great. Losing the general will have a devastating effect on the troops. I think more so than before. And the generals are a vital member of the.
Yeah, and also different generals can select a different variety of bodyguard units. As they introduced it with Rome, and there are very interesting bodyguard units, and especially with some of the Germanic barbarians, you can have very strong, like proper fighting generals, for example.
Just finally, it's always very exciting to see a new world explored by you guys at Total War. You've gone through a number of time periods and a number of factions now. If you had to choose your perfect time period or faction that you could choose a Total War game, any time period, what would you choose?
One that hasn't been done before.
One that hasn't been done before.
I quite like the American Civil War myself.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Never done before.
Yeah, never done before. That's the tough one, because you could revisit as well.
Yeah, personally, I really like the Second World War, for example, and there would be a lot of challenges with Second World War, but I think that could be a brilliant, like proper, literally Total War.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been Dave for ggsgamer talking about the new Attila Total War. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.